Joseph, you talked about how you are highly focused on ransomware education. So tell me, what is ransomware and what do we need to do about
That's an excellent question. I think it's the question that's kind of at the heart of a lot of this business decisions being made right now. So fundamentally, what ransomware is it is a class of malware, a really broad group of malicious code that makes it impossible to do your business in some way. Now, most of the time, that's done by encrypting whatever critical servers you have and simply not letting you get access to them. Sometimes it's more specialized where they'll, for example, delete an entire database, wipe it out, and have the copy stored elsewhere. It might be a case where they're just really specialized about having a DDoS happen, and they won't turn the DDoS off until you've paid. That is an older form. That's actually probably one of the earliest forms of an extortion racket via malware. So what we might now think of as ransomware. And it generally, now that we have things like Cloudflare, we don't see DDoS as the specific vector too often. But most of the time in the modern era, it's going to be the encryption or in some way modification or removal of access to critical business systems until such time as the victim has paid some ransom, thus ransomware. It really falls into extortion, broadly speaking, as a criminal activity. It's just that extortion has finally kind of made the jump from threats to break your knees to getting into your business and threatening to break your company's knees. So what we've got to deal with when we're talking about what to do about it is we've got to think about what works against extortion. How did we manage to deal with general extortion problems? And then how do we specialize that to the business of the internet? Well, the first thing that we deal with extortion problems was going to the source of it. The mafia basically went straight to, or the FBI went straight to war with the mafia, in addition to human rights. And it took them a while to figure out which one was going to win, but eventually the mafia kind of broke. And so what we've ended up finding from that is that extortion is systemic. An extortion racket is not something that one person does by themselves for any length of time. The reason for that, one, is because it's simply too profitable, and two, it's far too notorious. And so the way we kind of see that happening in modern ransomware is that where once upon a time, 5 years ago, when ransomware was really first taking off, it was everywhere. It was random people from any place would attack with ransomware and do whatever they could. Now, most ransomware is done by a handful of ransomware as a service providers, really large institutional malware and extortion providers who focus on cybercrime, who provide, the DPRK's GDP is half built on ransomware at this point. And so you find these organizations that once upon a time might have just been, one person knocking over a few shops. They're now reporting directly to a government, and they're now nation state actors in everything except for the fact they don't have to wear a uniform. And so when we're trying to deal with ransomware, we've got to understand that ransomware is coming from a particular source, and we have to think about that source as a particular problem. So you want to deal with, for example, where are people connecting to your network from? Is it from an area that you know to be associated with malicious activity? One of the things that I actually specialized in a previous job on was geofeasibility. In other words, based on the location that a computer is reporting, is it likely that a person is behaving in this way? One of the ways that we managed to identify where a specific ransomware actor, it wasn't ransomware at the time, a specific threat actor was active, where they lived, was because they took a lunch break every day, 30-minute lunch break at the exact same time. And we were able to figure out, based on that, where they were most likely going to be for a lunchtime, and based on that, where the major threat actors were. And we were able to make a lot of deductions and deduce a lot of what the tool was in use, what the normal TTPs were, all sorts of information about this actor based on that one piece of data. And so being able to understand what is likely for your business, what is normal, where should someone be coming from, where are the threats most likely to originate from, and what form do those threats most likely take? And that's the other thing that was done to prevent extortion, was massive amounts of neighborhood mobilization. People would inform their neighbors, hey, this is the bad element. These are people who are going to threaten you. And neighborhoods would stand up. You'd have unions, you'd have organizations of people who, instead of trying to appeal to the FBI, trying to appeal to some larger organization, would simply say, no, you have 5 people, we have 500 people. This is a bad idea. Now, you can't quite do that as well with ransomware actors. We can't necessarily get together a posse and go beat up North Korea, though it would be interesting geopolitically. But what you can do is rely on those networks of information and rely on your peers as an institution. Cybersecurity is one of the only places where there's not really an inter-business competition. It does not profit IBM if Microsoft gets hit with ransomware. Doesn't really do them any good. It does not profit Nissan if Honda gets hit with ransomware, because the entire auto industry is going to suffer for that in the long run, because it's going to make the auto industry a larger target for ransomware actors. So the better every organization is in a given industry, the less likely that industry is to be targeted. And one of the things that I love to point out is that Marriott, Starwood, and other sort of major hacks like that are what made hospitality such a valuable target for attackers. They saw the profit, they saw the availability. So the more you and all the businesses that you can communicate with that are like you, that fit your profile, work together to improve security and communicate threats and information, the less likely any of you is to be targeted by a given actor. And then, of course, the really technical specific ones: have backups, have offsite backups, have cold backups, have tape backups. Once a week, mail a backup to the Bahamas, whatever you can to have extra copies of your critical data. That is the easiest way you can stymie your ransomware actor. I can tell you honestly that I obviously I can't give you information about our clients, but once a ransomware actor has gotten into a network, if there are no backups present, better than even odds a company's going to have to pay that ransom. It's better than 50% of the time. And that's just according to the companies that have actually reported it to news agencies that have asked. When you start considering the companies that never reveal they were attacked or the companies that don't meet any thresholds, the numbers are not promising. So when you have backups in place, that's really your primary and maybe your only real recourse, is saying we have the data that is critical as of 24 hours ago. It'll cost us $150,000 to revert back to that, as opposed to the $70 million that's currently being demanded for a Kaseya breach. And that amount of prep work is really, it's intrinsic to all incident response, but ransomware is where there is sort of a point of no return, where if you didn't do your job up to X day, you can't go back and pretend you did before. There's no way to kind of put previous controls in place and it's just over. So yeah, it's just all about backups. Have them in multiple forms, have them encrypted, have them off-site, have them offline.
Perfect. That was awesome. Thank you so much. That's